The announcement came at 6:47 in the evening. Signal failure between two stations up the line. Indefinite delay. Please remain on the platform for further updates. The voice was calm, flat, and completely indifferent to the fact that several hundred people had just lost control of their evening. Nora Fielding stood beneath the awning on Platform 7, with her coat collar raised against the cold. The wind moved through the station in sharp bursts, carrying rain from somewhere beyond the tracks. Around her, commuters shifted into the familiar ritual of being delayed. Phones came out. Shoulders dropped. A man in a dark suit swore under his breath. A woman with a suitcase sat on a metal bench and stared at the departure board as if looking at it long enough might force a new number to appear. Nora did not sit. She stood near the yellow line, looking down the empty track. Something about the platform felt wrong. Not dangerous, not unfamiliar. Worse than that, recognizable. The metal beams above her, the dim lights under the awning, the old clock mounted over the platform sign. For as long as Nora could remember, that clock had run 5 minutes fast. It still did. She looked at it now, and for a moment, she was no longer 46 years old. She was 26. She was carrying a canvas bag with a paperback inside it. She was waiting for a delayed train after visiting her sister. She was standing in almost the exact same place, 20 years earlier, trying to convince herself that a delay was only a delay. Then a man behind her said, "Do you know if there is any coffee here that does not taste like melted plastic?" Nora turned. For 1 second her body reacted before her mind could correct it. Her chest tightened, her breath caught. Her heart made a small, irrational leap toward a name it had carried for 2 decades. Simon. But it was not Simon. The man standing behind her was younger than Simon would have been now. Early 40s perhaps. Dark hair, dark eyes, a navy coat damp at the shoulders from the rain. His expression was easy and mildly amused. He looked nothing like the man Nora had met on this platform 20 years ago. Not really. The feeling passed quickly, but not completely. "There is a vending machine by the ticket office," she said. "I would not call it coffee." The man smiled. "That is devastating news. It is a difficult station. I can see that." He looked toward the departure board. "Do you think the delay is actually indefinite?" "No," Nora said. "They only say indefinite when they do not want people asking more questions." He laughed softly. "That sounds like experience." "It is pessimism." "Same thing, sometimes." Nora almost smiled. The man stepped closer to the bench beneath the awning, then paused. "I am Peter," he said. "Peter Halloway." "Nora." He nodded once. "Nice to meet you during a public transportation crisis, Nora." She should have looked back at her phone. She should have sent Richard a message. She should have found another part of the platform and waited in silence. Instead, she said, "The vending machine has tea too." Peter looked relieved. "Then perhaps I can survive." They walked toward the ticket office together. It was not a meaningful decision. Not at first. It was only two strangers moving away from the wind. But later, Nora would remember the moment as the first small thing that had changed. Not because Peter mattered in the way Simon had mattered. He did not. Peter was not a lost possibility. He was not a threat to her marriage. He was simply a man who had spoken to her like she was still someone worth speaking to. And that was enough to disturb something she had spent 20 years keeping quiet. The vending machine gave Peter a cup of coffee that smelled burned before he even took a sip. Nora bought tea. They returned to Platform 7 and sat on opposite ends of the same bench. For a few minutes, they talked about nothing. Peter worked in publishing. He had been away for a conference. Nora told him she was a landscape architect. "What kind?" he asked. "Mostly public spaces, parks, courtyards, community projects." "Do you enjoy it?" The question was simple. It still caught her off guard. "I am good at it," Nora said. Peter waited. Nora looked down at the cup in her hands. "That was not what you asked." "No," he said. "It was not." She gave a short laugh. "I think I enjoy parts of it." "Which parts?" "The beginning," she said, "when something is still empty and you can imagine what it might become." Peter looked toward the dark tracks. And the rest? The rest is budgets, drainage, meetings, clients who want a space to feel natural but also completely controlled. That sounds like a difficult request. It is. He nodded as if he understood. Then he said, most people want their lives to feel natural and completely controlled too. Nora looked at him. Peter seemed surprised by his own sentence. Sorry, he said. That sounded more serious than I intended. No, Nora said quietly. It makes sense. A new announcement came over the speakers. Still delayed. Still no estimate. The crowd around them grew quieter. Nora looked again at the clock above platform 7. 5 minutes fast. Exactly as it had been 20 years earlier. And with that, the memory arrived in full. Not as a vague feeling. Not as nostalgia. As a door opening. 20 years earlier, Nora had been 26 years old, and 8 months into a relationship with a man named Richard. Richard was steady, reliable, kind. He worked in finance. He remembered birthdays. He always arrived when he said he would. He had no interest in games, chaos, or uncertainty. At 26, Nora had believed those qualities were the foundation of a good life. She had good reasons for believing it. When Nora was 11, her father lost his hardware business. The failure was not sudden. It did not happen with one dramatic phone call or one locked door. It happened slowly. A supplier went unpaid. A line of credit disappeared. Bills began arriving in envelopes her mother hid beneath newspapers. Then 1 month, the bank took the shop. A few months later, the family lost their house. Nora did not understand the financial details. She understood the sound of her mother crying behind a closed bedroom door. She understood the silence that appeared in her father afterward. She understood that the ground beneath the family could vanish even when everyone had assumed it was solid. After they moved into a smaller house, her mother developed a sentence she repeated whenever Nora wanted something uncertain. We do not build things on hope, Nora. We build them on what we know. Nora had taken that sentence into adulthood. She had built herself around it. She chose a practical degree, a stable career, a reliable man. Richard made sense. Richard felt safe. And then, one winter evening on platform 7, a stranger named Simon had made her feel something else. Simon had been sitting 2 benches away from her during a different delay. He had a paperback book with a broken spine. Everyone around him was irritated. Simon seemed almost pleased to have unexpected time. Nora had watched him for several minutes before he looked up. He caught her looking. Instead of looking away, he smiled. Do you think the train will ever come? He asked. I think it enjoys watching us suffer. That is fair. He introduced himself. Simon Vance. They talked for nearly 2 hours. At first, it was only small things. Books, bad coffee, the strange loneliness of waiting in crowded places. Then it became more than that. Simon asked questions and listened to the answers. Not politely, actually. Nora mentioned her father's old hardware shop. Simon asked what it had been called. She mentioned that she always chose the safe option. Simon asked what she thought she might choose if she did not have to feel safe first. No one had ever asked her that question in quite that way. She did not have an answer. Near the end of the delay, the departure board flickered back to life. Their trains were due within minutes of each other. Simon took a business card from his wallet and wrote a number on the back. He handed it to her. I would like to hear from you, he said. Only if you want to. Nora held the card. Then she said, I am seeing someone. Simon nodded. I know. You know? You mentioned him twice, he said. Both times like you were reminding yourself. Nora looked away. She felt exposed, not judged, seen. Simon did not push. He only said, Then I hope you are happy. Their trains arrived almost at the same time. They separated into different crowds. Nora went home. She sat at the kitchen table in the apartment she shared with a roommate. Then she wrote down everything she could remember. The cold air, the book, the sound of his laugh, The question he had asked, the card in her hand. She kept the card. She kept the notebook. 8 months later, she married Richard, and for 20 years, she told herself that Simon was only a memory, a beautiful one, a harmless one, a memory that did not mean anything about the life she had chosen. On platform 7, Peter took a sip of coffee and made a face. This is worse than expected. Nora returned to the present. Now you understand the station. I understand why it is called platform 7. 7 must be the number of suffering. She laughed. The laugh came out before she could stop it. It was not loud, but it was unguarded. Peter looked at her. That is better, he said. What is? You looked like you were carrying something heavy when you first turned around. Nora's smile faded. Peter seemed to realize he had said too much. I am sorry, he added. I do not know you. I should not make observations. No, Nora said. It is fine. But it was not fine. It was too close to fine. Because Richard had texted 30 minutes earlier. Running late? Everything okay? Nora had seen the message. She had not answered. Not because anything was wrong, not because she wanted to hide Peter, but because she did not know how to explain what had shifted inside her when a stranger asked about coffee and her body briefly believed the past had returned. She sent a reply. Signal failure. Stuck for a while. I will update. Practical. Correct. Empty. The delay lasted another 40 minutes. Peter and Nora kept talking. Not about anything dramatic. A book Peter had recently edited. A public garden Nora had designed near a school. His grandfather's old factory job. The parts of their work that exhausted them. The parts that still felt alive. Eventually, her train was announced on another platform. Peter's train would arrive 10 minutes after hers. They stood. It was nice talking to you, Peter said. It was. He did not ask for her number. He did not offer his. He only smiled and said, I hope your train is worth waiting for. Then he walked toward the far end of the platform. Nora stood beneath the awning for a moment longer. The station clock still ran 5 minutes fast. Her train arrived. She got on it, and as the city passed darkly beyond the windows, Nora realized she was not thinking about Peter. She was thinking about the card in the back of the notebook. She was thinking about Simon. She was thinking about a question she had avoided for 20 years. What if she had not chosen Richard because Richard was right for her? What if she had chosen Richard because Richard was safe? She went home to the house she shared with her husband. It was a good house, a quiet house. The garden in front was neat and balanced. Nora had planted every shrub herself. She had selected the flowers carefully. Nothing wild. Nothing that might take over the space. Richard was asleep on the couch when she came in. The television was still on. A nature documentary played quietly in the background. His hand rested on the blanket over his lap. Nora stood in the doorway and looked at him. He was not a bad man. That was part of the problem. If Richard had been cruel, if he had cheated, if he had shouted, if he had given her an obvious reason to leave, then perhaps she would have understood her own restlessness. But Richard was good. He had always been good. He brought home the tea she liked. He remembered their anniversary every year. He called Maya every Sunday, even when she was away at university. He had held Nora's hand in waiting rooms and funerals and long family dinners where she did not want to be. He had made a life with her, a stable life, a decent life. And yet, Nora had spent 20 years keeping one small room inside herself locked. She went upstairs after Richard woke and came to bed. She waited until his breathing settled. Then she got up again. In the small home office, she opened the bottom drawer of her desk. She moved aside old tax folders. Underneath them was a plain notebook with a faded blue cover. She sat on the floor and opened it. The handwriting belonged to a younger version of her. It was hurried, uneven, full of details she had tried to preserve before they disappeared. She read every page. Then she found the business card. Simon Vance. A number written in black ink, still legible. Her hand shook slightly as she held it. For 20 years, she had believed the card represented a road she had not taken, a life that might have been more alive, a different version of herself. But sitting alone in the dark office, Nora understood something she had not allowed herself to see. The card was not the reason she had felt distant from Richard. It was evidence. Evidence that she had learned to hide the parts of herself that wanted more than safety. She put the card back inside the notebook. Then she closed the drawer. For another 3 weeks, she did nothing. But nothing no longer felt neutral. It felt like a choice. Nora began to notice all the small places where she chose silence. At work, she did not object when a client changed a public garden plan into something safer and duller. At home, she did not tell Richard when something bothered her. When Maya called from university, Nora heard the same careful hesitation in her daughter's voice that she had carried at 26. Maya had been dating a student from her program for almost a year. His name was Ben. He was polite, reliable, focused. Nora had met him twice and liked him, or at least, she liked the kind of boy he was. One Friday, Maya came home for the weekend. They had dinner at the kitchen table. Richard made pasta. Maya talked about classes. Nora listened. Then Maya asked, "How did you two know you wanted to get married?" Richard answered first. "It felt easy," he said. "We wanted similar things. We got along. We trusted each other." It was a familiar answer, one Nora had heard him give before. Maya looked at Nora. "What about you?" Nora held her fork above her plate. For a second, she almost gave the same answer. Then she thought about Peter on platform 7. She thought about Simon's card. She thought about the notebook in the drawer. "I think," Nora said slowly, "sometimes people choose what feels certain before they ask what feels true." The table went quiet. Richard looked at her. Maya looked down. Nora immediately regretted saying it, not because it was false, because it was too close to true. "I do not mean that marriage is wrong," she added. "I mean that certainty can feel like proof. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is just fear wearing a sensible coat." Richard's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Maya did not speak. Later that night, Nora found her daughter standing in the kitchen with a glass of water. "Are you okay?" Nora asked. Maya shrugged. "Do you think I am like you?" Nora leaned against the counter. "In what way?" "I do not know. Choosing things because they make sense. Staying because leaving would make everyone ask questions." Nora looked at her. Maya stared down into her glass. "Ben is good," Maya said. "He is kind. But when I picture my life with him, it is like looking at a room with all the furniture already placed. There is nothing wrong with it. I just do not know where I fit." Nora felt something break open quietly inside her. At 26, she had not had anyone tell her that uncertainty was allowed. Not her mother, not her father, not Richard, not even Simon, although Simon had come close. She reached for Maya's hand. "You do not have to decide tonight," Nora said. "I know, but do not confuse a good person with the right life. They are not always the same thing." Maya looked at her mother. "Did you?" Nora could not answer. "Not honestly. Not yet." The following Tuesday, Richard left for a 4-day work trip. The house was quiet after he went. Too quiet. Nora came home from work, made tea, and sat at the kitchen table. The notebook was in front of her. She had taken it out before dinner and had not put it away. For an hour, she did nothing. Then she opened it. She found the card. She picked up her phone. The number might no longer work. It probably did not. 20 years was a long time. People moved. People changed jobs. People disappeared from old versions of their lives. Nora dialed anyway. It rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, a woman answered. "Hello?" Nora stopped breathing for a moment. "I am sorry," she said. "I may have the wrong number. I was trying to reach Simon Vance." The woman on the other end was quiet. Then she said, "This used to be my father's number." Nora gripped the edge of the table. "I am sorry," she said again. He passed away 3 years ago. The kitchen seemed to grow smaller. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. Nora looked at the business card beside her hand. I did not know, she said. I am sorry for your loss. Thank you. The woman's voice was gentle, older than Nora had expected, perhaps in her 30s. Can I ask how you knew him? Nora closed her eyes. How did she explain it? How did she explain a man she had met once, for 2 hours, 20 years earlier? We met during a train delay, she said, a long time ago. We talked for a while. There was another pause. Then the woman said, That sounds like my father. Nora swallowed. He was good at talking to strangers? He was good at making people feel like they were not strangers anymore. Nora did not know what to say. The woman continued, My name is Lauren. Nora. Nora, Lauren repeated softly. He met my mother a few years after that, I think. They were married 11 years. Not long enough, really, but they were happy. Nora felt a strange relief move through her. It was painful, but it was relief. Simon had not been waiting for her. He had not become a ghost trapped in the same 2 hours she had been trapped in. He had lived. He had loved someone else. He had raised a daughter. He had filled a house with books. Lauren told her that Simon had kept reading until the end, that he had worked in consulting for years before changing careers, that he loved old train stations because he thought people told the truth in places where they were only passing through. Nora almost laughed at that. He said that? Not exactly. He said it in a more dramatic way. That sounds like him. Lauren laughed softly. Then she said, He told me a story once about a woman he met during a delay. I was young, so I do not remember much. He said he had met someone who made him think about the life people carry when nobody is looking. Nora looked down at the notebook. He remembered? I think so, Lauren said. He remembered a lot of people. That was his problem. He paid attention. The call lasted only 12 minutes. When it ended, Nora placed the phone on the table. She did not cry immediately. She sat there in silence. For 20 years, Simon had been a question, a door she had never opened, a fantasy that had become larger because it had never been tested against reality. Now reality had arrived. Simon had not been the life she missed. He had been a moment, a meaningful moment, but a complete one. His life had continued without her, and her life had continued without him. The pain she felt had almost nothing to do with losing Simon. She had lost him 20 years earlier. The pain was realizing how much of herself she had hidden behind the idea of him. She opened the notebook again. This time, she read it differently, not as proof that she had once met the love of her life, as proof that, once, she had spoken without fear. She had listened without planning an exit. She had felt alive, and she had spent 20 years believing that feeling belonged to someone else. It did not. It belonged to her. Richard came home 3 days later. He found Nora sitting at the kitchen table after dinner. The notebook was between them. Richard stopped when he saw it. What is that? He asked. Nora looked at him. I need to tell you something. He sat down slowly. She did not rehearse. She did not soften the story until it became meaningless. She told him about Simon, the delay, the conversation, the card, the notebook, the call. She told him that nothing had happened. Then she told him the harder truth. That does not mean it meant nothing, she said. Richard looked at the notebook for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. Did you love him? Nora felt the question land in the center of the room. I do not know, she said. I did not know him long enough to love him. Richard nodded slightly. But I loved how I felt when I was with him, she continued. I felt like I could say things without making them smaller first. I felt like I was allowed to want something without proving it was practical. Richard looked away. And you did not feel that with me. No, Nora said. Not enough. But I do not think that was only your fault. Richard stared at the table. You think I was the safe option? I think I made you into one. He looked up. Nora took a breath. You were kind. You were stable. You made sense. I was afraid of uncertainty, and I chose a life where I would not have to risk much. That was not fair to you either." Richard's face changed. Not anger, not forgiveness. Something deeper, something tired. "I thought you wanted that life," he said. "I did. I think I did. But I wanted other things too. I just stopped saying them." For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Richard stood and walked toward the garage door. Nora watched him. He opened it. The garage was dark. A few seconds later, he returned carrying a narrow keyboard beneath one arm. It was dusty. The black case was faded at the corners. He set it on the table. "I used to play," he said. Nora knew that, or thought she did. "I know you studied music. I told you that," Richard said. "I did not tell you how much I wanted it." He rested his hand on the keyboard case. "Before we met, I had a chance to apply for a program. It was not a fantasy. It was real. It would have been difficult but real." "What happened?" "My father got sick. My family needed money. I took the job in finance because it was practical." Nora nodded slowly. "That makes sense." "Yes," Richard said. "That is what I kept telling myself." He looked at her. "I told myself it was a responsible choice, and maybe it was. But after a while, I stopped admitting that I missed it." Nora looked at the keyboard. "How long have you had this?" 11 years. "You have been playing?" "Sometimes, when you are not home." The words hurt, not because Richard had played without telling her, because she understood exactly why. They had both built private rooms. They had both mistaken silence for peace. Nora touched the edge of the keyboard case. "Why did you not tell me?" Richard gave a faint, sad smile. "Why did you not tell me about Simon?" Neither of them answered. They did not fix everything that night. They did not decide their marriage had been saved. They did not promise to become new people by morning. But Richard opened the keyboard case. He plugged it in. Then he played. At first he was hesitant. The notes were uneven. His hands moved carefully, as if asking permission. Then something changed. The music became fuller. Not perfect, not polished, but real. Nora sat at the kitchen table and listened to her husband play something she had never known he carried. For the first time in years, she saw him not as the man who had made her feel safe, not as the man she had chosen because he was predictable, but as someone with his own unfinished life, someone who had also been afraid. When he stopped, Nora said, "I would like to hear more." Richard looked at her. "I would like to play more." It was not a grand declaration. It was smaller than that, more difficult, a beginning. Over the next few weeks, nothing changed all at once. Richard still went to work early. Nora still managed site plans and budgets and clients. The garden still looked neat from the street. Maya still did not know what to do about Ben. But small things began to change. Richard moved the keyboard from the garage into Nora's home office. The room had once held only her desk and the locked drawer where she kept the notebook. Now, in the evenings, it sometimes held music. Nora showed Richard parts of the notebook. Not every page, not every private thought, but enough that Simon no longer existed only inside her. Enough that the secret lost some of its power. She called Maya. They talked longer than usual. Nora told her that she had once confused certainty with truth. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I broke up with Ben." Nora closed her eyes. "How do you feel?" "Terrible," Maya said, "and relieved." "That can happen at the same time." "I know. I think I am learning that." Nora looked out the kitchen window. The garden was beginning to wake after winter. New leaves had appeared on the shrubs. The ground looked messy in places, less controlled. She found that she liked it. 3 weeks later, Nora returned to Platform 7. There was no delay, no rain, no dramatic announcement. She had been visiting a project site on the other side of the city, and the station was simply the fastest route home. The platform was nearly empty. A few commuters stood with headphones in their ears. A teenager leaned against a pillar and watched videos on his phone. The train board showed normal times. Nora walked beneath the awning. Then she looked up. The clock was correct. For 20 years it had been 5 minutes fast. Now it told the exact time. She stood there for a while, staring at it. She did not know when it had been repaired. She did not know who had noticed it first. Perhaps it had happened years ago, and Nora had simply kept remembering the old clock because she needed something outside herself to remain unchanged. But it was fixed now, quietly, without ceremony. The bench where she had once sat with Simon was empty. The bench where she had later sat with Peter was empty too. Nora thought about Simon. She thought about Lauren, who had sent her a photograph of Simon holding a book beside a lake when he was younger. She thought about Richard in the home office, playing after dinner. She thought about Maya, beginning the difficult work of becoming someone who chose truth before certainty. None of it had resolved neatly. Her marriage was not suddenly effortless. Richard still withdrew when he was worried. Nora still wanted to retreat into silence when conversations became difficult. Maya still did not know exactly what her next relationship would look like, but they had begun to ask different questions. Not, what is safest? Not, what will make everyone comfortable? But, what is true? What have I been afraid to say? What part of myself have I placed in a drawer and called finished? The train arrived. The doors opened. Nora stepped inside with the other passengers. Before the doors closed, she looked back once at the clock above platform 7. It showed the right time. For the first time in 20 years, Nora did not feel like she was waiting for another life to arrive. She sat by the window. The train moved forward, and this time, she let herself go with it. This video is a dramatized narrative inspired by real human emotions, experiences, and life-changing moments. Any resemblance to specific real people or events is coincidental. Closing question for comments. Is there a person, a choice, or a version of your life that you have kept alive in your mind because you were afraid to learn what really happened to it?